Hey folks, Luke here from Conan Fitness and welcome to the Exercise of the Month review. This month we are reviewing the hover, or what some people might call the bridge or the plank, essentially the same exercise. The benefits of doing an exercise as such is pretty much based around strengthening some of your postural muscles and core muscles. You hear a lot of people say they're doing it because they want to work on their abs or their six-pack, and it does work those muscles, but really our main focus is for posture and core strength. And when we improve our core strength, you find that strength in other exercises naturally increases. Your total strength goes up because you've got a stronger chassis as a body. And when the chassis of the body is strong, the auxiliary and phasic movements that we do about the chassis is a lot more functional. So let's have a review at some of the faults that are commonly done in such a common exercise as the hover, some of the tips to doing it right, and some of the variations that you can input into your program to get the most out of it. Let's have a look at the hover. Okay, so the hover is basically a position where you're holding your body like a nice stiff plank and suspending it off the ground in either what we call the elbow position, or you can alternatively do it on your hands, so long as the body is a nice straight plank, and that's basically the essence of a bridge or hover or plank. We're going to display this exercise on the elbows as it's more commonly done and go through some of the faults. Firstly, what you see a lot of is a rounding of the shoulders. So what Kelly's doing here is protracting the shoulder blades. You can see a big winging or rounding around her back or shoulder blades, and that's so common in doing the hover. One, because it makes it easier, so people often do it, but it's actually promoting an incorrect posture. Essentially what you want to be looking like, if you're to do a normal posture standing, to lift your arms, that's where your shoulder blades want to be, not in a rounded position. So going back to that position, Kelly, the next thing that they most commonly do is drop the head down or the neck. Again, this helps the position, makes it a little bit easier, but you can see a sharp angle in the neck joint there. So looking probably about a foot in front of the elbows, just towards the ground, that gives it a nice posture. Finally, one of the last faults is that they commonly will either drop the bum down, or more importantly, you see in the pelvis, they arch the low back. So when the pelvis tilts forward too much, because they're losing a bit of strength throughout the abdominal region, you get this steep curve in the low spine. You don't have to hold that too long, Kel, because it'll hurt. Now, to look at some of the tips to do a really good, a nice posture hover, firstly remember one last fault that's also commonly done is that rather than lowering the bum and arching the back, some people push the bum way too high, and you notice that the shoulders come back, and here you can see that the shoulders aren't above the elbows, they're behind the elbows, and we want the shoulders over the elbows. So if you go forward, Kel, the shoulders are straight over the elbows and the body's nice and flat. Just have a bit of a rest. So to go from a resting position to a proper hover, what we're going to do is get into our plank position. The knees are off the ground. We want a nice straight body, remembering that we want our natural curve in the lumbar spine, so the bum's just a nice straight plank from heels to the head. Our shoulder blades are basically retract only as far as they usually would be. They're not retract anymore, and they're certainly not rounded. They should just be a nice even space, and the neck's in a comfortable position, shoulders over the elbows. What I want you to also think of doing is lengthening. The distance between your heels and the crown of your head, I want you to lengthen and think of being as tall as possible, and that will stop that crunching or the bum raising effect. You can have a rest again. Finally, to put it all together, let's look at some of the variations that you can do to get the most out of your hover. Let's have a look at that. Alrighty, some variations on our normal hover. From this standard position, what we've got is a rocking hover. If you can slowly rock back into your heels like you're doing a calf stretch, and slowly rock forward all the way over till you're getting at the front tibialis stretch, and then all the way back. Just a slow movement puts a dynamic function towards the standard hover, and just stresses those postural muscles in a dynamic way, which is a really good technique. Another one, if you just have a quick rest, Kel, is a 3-point hover, and even harder than that is a 2-point hover. 3-point hover is where we suspend, rather than 4 points of contact being 2 legs and 2 elbows, we've only got 3. So 2 legs, 1 elbow, or 2 elbows, 1 leg. And let's have a look at that. From our normal posture, if you were to raise just your left leg off the ground, so just one leg is a millimetre off the ground, we've now only got 3 points touching the ground. There's a slight harder variation. Obviously you can switch legs to do the other side. Or we can do the variation on the upper body. So if you were to straighten one arm, Kel, if you put your legs slightly wider apart and just take one arm off the ground, aiming to keep everything else as stabilised as possible, that's also a 3-point hover, and having a rest. Now that's a harder variation. To make that even harder still is the 2-point hover, and that's where we've got opposite arm and leg. So from your normal position, Remembering that wider feet makes it sometimes easier. So if you're doing it for the first time, widen the feet. If you want an added challenge, have them closer. Now let's raise the right leg just off the floor and at the same time our left elbow, aiming to keep everything else as still as possible. If you see this rocking motion, one hip's higher than the other, that's not what you want. You want to aim to have both hips the same height off the ground, and that is a fantastic hover. Again, you can have a rest. And that's really good, aiming to hold that. Finally, we also have what we call the side hover. So if you were to face on one elbow, face one side, both feet together on one elbow, aiming to lift the hips off the ground and aim to keep the body just suspended as a nice straight plank off the ground. Remembering this, remembering to keep the shoulder blade back. If Kelly's shoulder blade is released, you see the shoulder shrugging up towards the ear, and that's not too great on the shoulder joint. But if this is too hard for you, a slight variation, if you take that top leg and just pop it in front of the left, that's it, and then do the hover again, this is slightly easier for those that can't do it. And if this is still too hard, then you use the top hand and put it on the ground just for a little bit of added support, lift the hips off the ground, and most people can manage this if you keep the shoulder blade back. Obviously you can do that on the other side as well. So hopefully you can put some of them together, practice good technique on your hover, and throw in some of the variations for a bit of added fun and variety, and hopefully you can strengthen up that structural core of your body. Good luck.